Mandy and Wendy from Massey University, and they, like Mark and AUT and also USP, have been using Mahara for a very, very long time. And we kind of reminiscent about it, and probably we're also one of the first ones to use Mahara here in New Zealand. So I'm really excited to find out more what they have to say about competencies and working with their students just up the road in Albany.
Thanks, Christina. Hey everybody, I'm Mandy, or Mandia, and Wendy, and as Christina said, we work at Massey University and have been there for a number of years and used Mahara for a number of years. So I looked back at our title and I thought, whoa, that was a mouthful, where did we end? So I had to foreground some of the key concepts just so that I knew what it was that we were going to talk about. So course competency is a big thing in our program, so we will talk about that. But course competencies are domain competencies. And where really the university and others are getting much more interested in the other side of things. Yes, we can do the course competencies, but what about those other employability competencies? Or the soft skills, or the transferable skills, you know, the teamwork, the grit, the bounce back ability, the sharing of things, the teamwork, those skills. How do we do those? So those are what we're calling soft skills. And our university is really interested at the moment in looking at a uni-vitae, where they do the course competencies, domains, disciplines, but also alongside of that the C skills. And Wendy said she was just out in the corridor now, and you saw...
I saw that AUT is doing that at the moment as well. There's a pull-up banner that says, we know you've got a degree, but do you have the C skills of communication and curiosity and cooperation? So exactly sort of on that wavelength.
So that's really what we're playing with now. We've kind of for many years looked at using evidence in my portfolio for our students for their course competencies, but what about these other competencies, the soft skills, the employability competencies? So we do it in ePortfolios because our program is pretty much, we work with professionals, and I'll tell you a bit about that. And we feel as part of their developing their professional identity, the whole ePortfolio and how we assess. So we were going to move it into employability because we had hoped we'd have the new version of Mahara with its smart evidence, but we've only got it 50 minutes, so we haven't quite got to there. So that's our looking forward, how we're going to build it into their smart evidence. Okay, so a bit about us, about our program. We, the metaphor that we use, if you can zoom in a bit, is the T-shaped professional. So the course that we run is a program for resource teachers. So these are practicing teachers, experienced teachers who come back and do a postgraduate course with us. The postgraduate course is in the area of learning support or special education needs. So they're resource teachers of, and we have 7 different endorsement areas. They're resource teachers for children with autism, blind and low vision, deaf and hearing impairment, early intervention, gifted education, learning and behaviour. What have I left out? One of them. So they teach us in the area of learning support. The contract that we won from the Ministry of Education was to teach it nationally. So it is the only program in New Zealand that does this from Kaitaia to Blau. So the way we've constructed it is that we believe that teachers who learn together will be able to practice better in the field. So we set it up as being a T professional that you would learn alongside each other about each other. That's the T shape. You'll be very broad and you'll learn interprofessional discipline skills, but you will also learn your endorsement area in depth. So it's the breadth, talking, learning with, from and about each other, but also the depth down into your specialist area. The course competencies is easy. So the course competencies, you rent out to the field, what do you need your practitioners to be? There are professional bodies that do that as well, so that part was fun. We knew the domain content we had to do. So the course content, we'll show you how we digitally badge that, and then they put it in their portfolio. But it's these interprofessional competencies that we thought were more challenging and more difficult. And those are the employability competencies we feel. Because to work effectively in a really complex area like learning support, where there are these wicked problems, the success is the intangible stuff. Yep, you can know your stuff, but it's how well you work together and translate that across disciplines within complex teams working around complex areas. So that's the stuff we were more interested in. We feel that in working with our students, because they're post-grad, they're professional it's about them joining, becoming who they are by belonging to their community of practice. So very much that Etienne Wenger notion of becoming who you are through belonging to a community of practice. Not only the community practice of their discipline area, but a community of practice that crosses different discipline areas within that wide field of learning support. The way we do it then is two spaces. So Moodle, we say, is our teaching space, and we use Moodle to put all the course content, to put all the forums, to put all the databases and so on. Mahara, which is our one is called My Portfolio, is their learning space. And we've tried to use their learning space as being their ongoing professional development. So as well as the T-shaped professional, we also talk to them about lifelong. You join us for 2 years, but actually it's your lifelong learning as professionals. So it's lifelong learning, life-wide, you're going to learn in different contexts, and life deep, it's the values that you then start developing as part of your professional identity. So those are our two spaces that we use, and that's a little bit about our program. So how do we badge in the course competencies, or how do we and evidence them? Every paper has 6 domain areas, so 6 areas that we've designed as the course competencies. So those are things like, from the field we heard, you need to know about ethical practice, you need to know about professional practice in your discipline, around reflective practice. All of those will form different domains of the various papers, and they do 4 papers over 3 years. 1 that's domain specific, and 3 that are interprofessional that they apply. Once they've got those domain areas, we badge them, so we give them a digital badge that's generated in Moodle, and the metadata sits behind, and they transfer that into their My Portfolios. So I'll show you an example of that in a My Portfolio site. But what we've done over the years, so this is our 7th cohort that's come through. Every year we plot our own spidergram. We ask them the question of how important do you think these professional competencies are? What's your level of confidence and competence coming in at the end of the first year and at the end of the next year? And I think this is the one from cohort 5, but every year it's the same. The purple line is how important they think these competencies to be. The blue line is where they are at the beginning. The red line is where they are at after year 1, and the green line is where they are at after year 2. And we really like the fact, sorry, I'm supposed to be standing next to the mic. We really like the fact that the purple line is just at the edge. They're still not there, so it is lifelong learning. They're still going to move further. So an example of how they would document these core competencies. This is an example of one of our students' portfolio. So you'll see how she'll, at the top, she'll talk about her context. So there she's explaining, this is for her domain 4, what her context is. All of our students design their own learning goals. So we say these are the competencies, but we recognize that you're all coming from different contexts. You have different background experience. You have different contexts that you're working in. You tell us your story. You set your learning goals against those competencies, and you tell us how you're going to meet them. So no 2 students have the same goal. It's totally authentic and contextualized assessment and practice. So there they tell us their story first about what their context is, what their knowledge is, and what they want their learning to be against that competency. So it's meeting some of those things that Mark Northover was talking about this morning, of trying to shift to authentic practice, trying to be more disruptive, trying to be more personalized, and trying to have different assessments. Then they will set their learning plan for us in their portfolio. So they'll say why they're doing it, what the competency is, what their learning goals might be, what their artifacts would look like that would demonstrate they're meeting that competence, and then what the anticipated outcome might be, and then they self-assess that. So they do that for each goal.
And like you talked about in the session just prior, their evidence can look however they want to capture it. So they could just have the learning logs like you spoke of and take photos of them and scan them. So they use My Portfolio in all the ways to try to capture that.
So then they'll give us their artifacts, which are there. They map them according to the Massey, which is our spokes for our domains. and then they reflect on it. Don't need to go too much. This we've been doing many years, and students are very effective in using this as the start of their ongoing lifelong learning, their progression in their ePortfolios. What we've found really gratifying is that a lot of the professional bodies that they then move into, so one of our groups are the Resource Teachers of Learning Behaviour, the RTLBs in New Zealand. They then are, the body now evaluates them. So their performance reviews are now using the ePortfolio. So it's moving into practice, which is what we hoped it would do, and it has done. Okay, so that's the domain knowledge. That's the competencies against their coursework, which we're fine with. But what was more challenging for us was the badging of the interprofessional.
So in the first few years, we just looked at the formal domain knowledge, and that was much easier. It was tangible and it was measurable. You could tell us why you used to be a 3 on it as culturally responsive or interprofessional. Now you're a 6, and how you know. But as we keep saying, we wanted to get to these broader skills, the working with others, the building relationships, creating cultures of care, all those things that are so important. And we had 2 things we wondered. First was what soft skills were we going to prioritize? There's so many to choose from. It's interesting to see the ones AUT has chosen. What would we call them? Because soft skills just has connotations we didn't love. They're actually the kind of fiercest aspects of your practice, not the sort of soft bubble bath kind. We didn't want it to have that connotation. And then how would we measure those? Because by definition, you can't be a 6 on relationship building and then move up to an 8. What does that look like anyway? So because we're in education, 2 people that had done this first were the New Zealand curriculum, which is the curriculum for school-age students, and then Te Whāriki, which is the early childhood curriculum. And both of those are national curricula, and both of them look at formal knowledge, and they also look at what the New Zealand curriculum calls key competencies. So they talk about things like thinking, communicating effectively, using language well. What they do really well is they use the concepts from Te Ao Māori rather than, they give both. But what really resonated for us, because we have this program that's all about learning together, we decided to embrace the Māori concepts because they focus on the individual, but always the purpose of learning was to be able to lift the community. And so we wanted to get that message across to our students that we wanted everything they do to lift the learning community in Mahara, in Moodle, and then also to lift the education communities out there. So I'll talk a little bit more about the competencies we went with, but basically we drew on the 5 from the New Zealand curriculum: manakitanga, whakawhanaungatanga, building relationships, creating cultures of care. And then we also, because we have students in early childhood, we also drew on the ones from Te Whāriki, which are very similar: promoting well-being, contributing, exploring. They're just really nice, rich concepts. So that answered one of our questions, the what soft skills we'll look at, what interprofessional competencies. Then we wondered, but how do you measure them? Because as I said, by definition, you really can't tell if someone's whanaungatanga has gone from a 6 to a 7. It's not culturally appropriate either to give badges for things like that. So the minute you start sort of relating it to formal competency, it just doesn't sit comfortably. So what we decided to do instead was offer peer recognition of your interprofessional skills. And that involved badging, but not badging that comes from the site for completing things like our formal badges, but these are badges that are gifted to the students by the students. So I'll just show you. So what they've done now, as Mandia showed you, they're already used to saying, I know this is evidence-based practice, I was a 1, now I'm a 7. But we've talked about, now we've added what we call the sticky bits, the interprofessional competencies, sort of the glue of your practice, that no one cares how strong your evidence-based practice is if you can't build relationships, bring people together, work across teams, et cetera. So our students now do the same thing where they consider, well, how am I at well-being? How am I at mana atua? How could I grow? How could I share this? How could I use it to lift the community? And they use my portfolio. In those final portfolios, they also capture their artifacts of these intangibles. And sometimes, I'll just show you what Saul's done, because Saul always does things in quite a clever way.
From the reading to match the corresponding colours with the colours in my practicum plan document. So the green for professional practice, and you can see the orange there for reflective and ethical.
The details aren't as important, but we're really into bringing the personal to the professional.
So that would be an example that he would embed in his portfolio to explain how he's done it. So we've just gone out of it to the YouTube.
Yeah, so in his portfolio, he's talked about where he's at in each of those spokes of the MA5, the formal, and then how he sits against each of the sticky bits, how he knows. And we get to know him because of the voiceovers and the screencasts and all those sorts of things. We also teach, but they don't necessarily come knowing what is whanaunga-taonga and what could that look like in our practice. So we also use, in our teaching updates, which we do through Mahara, with James, who's our cultural advisor, each month we break down one of these concepts. So what is whanaunga-taonga? What would it look like as a specialist teacher? How would you know that you've lifted your community, etc. And then when they recognize this in each other, they give out the badge, the soft skills badge. What do they do with it? And Picky, who actually works at AUT, gifted us this Hoey. It's a tohu, which means a badge, a gift. But she drew this one for us as an oar because of the whakatoki that says, let us not lift our oars out of unison so that we can paddle to the shore. So that whole idea that if we're all in there, all using our oars, we'll get farther, we'll get there together. And so when students see each other demonstrating any of these interprofessional skills, they come onto the site and they just complete a quick questionnaire sort of thing. On our Moodle site, and they gift Hoey to each other. So James introduces it, he's our cultural advisor, and then so we'll focus on something like Tautaritanga, which is thinking and making meaning and using language effectively, but to support the group. So then someone will say, I'd like to gift a Hoey to Bob because of the way he came up with my Mahara templates and then shared them with all of us to save us time. And we'll give out these Hoey, and then they immediately capture those in their portfolios. So we send out an email from the site saying, congratulations, you've been gifted a Hoey. And then this is Amanda, who then immediately just PDF'd it and popped it into her Mahara portfolio to demonstrate how she thought someone else had recognized her teeth skills.
So we've done that for a year, and we wanted to see what students felt about that, because it's shifting the thinking of badging from we give you a badge when you demonstrate competence that we said what it is, to now it's your peers recognizing that you've done something that is slightly different. So we've shifted the gifting of it to awarding it. What did they think about it? So we just emailed out briefly a survey to all those who were gifted or got the gift. Who gifted or got it. 4 simple questions. What did you think about it? Did it acknowledge these soft skills? Did it make a difference in terms of giving or receiving? Where might you use it afterwards? So what do you think it's worthwhile, basically? So those 4 questions, we did a content analysis of question 1, what did they think about it? And we just put that into a tag crowd so that the keywords would come up that would be most evident. And then the questions 2 to 4 we just did a thematic analysis of. So our tag crowds.
I'll just walk you quickly through the themes. So the tag crowd was really interesting. Almost every single person that we asked how did it feel to receive said I was surprised and I was humbled. I think that speaks to how rarely we actually focus on the most important skills. Gosh, you really helped me feel part of the group. That's not the kind of compliments people usually get in post-grad, especially from their peers. So we got a lot of surprised and humbled. Then everybody had a variation of honored, I felt appreciated, affirmed, valued, those sorts of things. And we got a lot of guilty. Everyone kind of said, oh, I don't know if I do anything that's above and beyond what everybody on the course does. So they were kind of sheepish about getting them. And also, ooh, I forgot to give these out myself. So I don't know if that's sort of teacher humility, but wishing that they had given as many as they had received. And then the themes, there were 6 main themes that came through, so to speak to each of them very quickly. One was, everyone said, a variation of, it was so much more tangible than thank you. Even an email saying thank you, this just felt really good to give this electronically tangible thank you, and to recognize something that we don't usually recognize, these things like whanaungatanga. They talked about, they talked about how it felt good that it was a little more formal and a little more public. So you weren't just saying, thank you, my friend, for helping me. You were actually putting it out where everyone could see that this person had done this, and it felt good to be able to lift up your colleagues in that way. They thought the power of a peer nomination was really important, that it felt much better than if we send out something, because that might feel contrived, or it might feel like it's tied to the marks and the marking criteria, but actually that they were best placed because they're all students in there together. They know what above and beyond looks like in ways that we don't, so it was really important to them that it came from peers. They loved the culturally responsive bit, that we kind of got that right, that we're tinkering with everything else. But the fact that it was a Hui, the fact that that whakatoki really speaks to the program, and the fact that we went with the Te Maori meanings rather than the English meanings, the group really appreciated that. But the 2 most important themes, I think, one was the sense of community, that often you would get this Hui from someone you'd never met because we're kaitaia to bluff, learning online together. The fact that someone that was almost a stranger took the time to do this for you was really affirming, and it started to build that online community. One person said, I felt like it tied us all together, and often I felt lonely and isolated online learning. This made all the difference. And that it really tapped into their professional identities in ways that other formal assessments hadn't. So they said it helped me recognize gifts that I have. I hadn't really thought about professional practice being about manakitanga until I got a Hui, and I realized that actually that is something I bring, and that's something I'm trying to grow, and thank you for noticing. So those were kind of the big themes that came through.
So reflecting on that, looking back at what we've done and where do we go to from there, what was interesting for us is that a lot of the people that did really well in terms of the domain knowledge were also those that did well in the interprofessional knowledge. They were the ones that gifted and did get gifted. And I don't know what that says, not all the time, and so how do we build up the others, but that was one of the findings. I think that it did talk to that notion that identity is who we are in what we do, that it's the implicit and the explicit, that it's the soft skills as well as the course competency skills. Also that the strength of the Hui was in the non-formal, that we are starting to get it right in capturing the formal, but it's the non-formal, the intangible, those things that make the difference in the workplace. The difference between espoused theory and theory in use. So the espoused notion that they would be good in a particular group wasn't necessarily the fact, but it was the in use when they actually were demonstrating it, and that was recognized by others, was more critical. So it wasn't, and that was a real challenge. How do we award it? And we're sitting with that same issue at our universities. You can't award some of these things. It just goes against the grain to award teamwork or collaboration. But recognizing it in others and kind of gifting it to others seemed to be a way that we were playing with. We do still struggle with the narrative that we have around the concept, so the narrative around soft skills, and we need to find a better word for it. We also struggle around the narratives around badging. The shifting from the fact that it's Girl Guides getting certain things to a much more sophisticated micro-skilling. It's credentialing in a different way, and that's really important. So the narratives around badging and the narratives around soft skills, I think we need to start thinking about how we talk about them.
So a few of our students said, I thought it was a bit silly, to be honest, until I got one and I realized how cool it was. But they had to sort of live it to move beyond thinking it was a Girl Guide badge.
And I think the badging is shifting because Fitbits and, you know, a lot of people are badging in different contexts now, so people are starting to understand the value of badging in formal and non-formal areas. But I think for us, going back to the core of our program, which is all about developing professional identity, and professional identity that this exercise has shown us is about mana. It's about who you are, and it's about what reputation you have in the community. And your reputation is everything. You can say that you've got these skills, you've got the degree, but do you have the reputation? Do you have the trust from somebody else in your community to say that you do it? So reputation is where we're wanting to shift to. And in terms of that, we thought that the work that Rachel Botsman is doing, and we won't play the whole thing, but she talks about reputation being the new currency. She talks about in the world of Uber, you know, your Uber driver, you rate your Uber driver, they rate you. In the world of Airbnb, you rate. So we're moving beyond just saying you've got the qualification to drive a car. We're moving to the point of reputation. Do others say that you're good enough? And reputation is what's going to give you the job, give you the edge, give you the employability. And that's kind of where we're leading to with these badging of soft skills in a way that it's not us saying you're doing it or even students saying they've done it and giving us evidence. It's your peers. It's the reputation that you have that others are saying, yep, she's a good psychologist or an RTLB, or she did this or she did that. So it's that space that we're playing with and moving to and being challenged. So Christina's given us the sign, we can't play it, but I'd recommend you go and watch it. It's a really good video. Yep, sure. What is our last one? Have we got a last slide there? Oh, so the last slide then is where we want to take it to, is we want to start using, which we had hoped to be able to do, but we weren't there yet, in terms of the smart evidence portfolio, because I think the functionality of the latest version around smart evidence will enable us to do this so much more effectively. So we can have our professional competencies, which we award, which we know how to do it, which professionally, but then we can also have the interprofessional competencies. And we can play around with that in terms of, do students give evidence, or is it this reputation that others give? And I think the smart evidence framework will give us the ability to do it across the paper, plus for them ongoing in their practice. Again, that link between badges and the Mahara or the ePortfolio that they create. So, yeah, that's it.
One question.
Yes, sure.
With the badging, would a student get more than one badge from different...
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
We've been playing with that too. We thought if they started out light and the more you got it, kind of the badge darkens, or something to kind of show you've gotten 5 and this is what they're for, and then have the metadata behind them. But
yeah,
exactly.
So
and you're never done.
Your Uber rating or your reputation increases the more you've done it. Yeah.
Have you thought about, since you're out badging quite extensively by the looks of it, have you thought about using the open badges for it, or did you specifically not use them so as not to get into the badge terminology?
Yeah, I think just for the purpose of this course, I think that's where we can go, but the purposes of this course, I thought we would just stay with Moodle, the link between Moodle and Mahara. Yeah, and so we just award them in Moodle and design them there.
They have
but it's
talked
interesting
about
that they export them. Yes. So, but they are, some do export them, and then they start putting it on their LinkedIn page or wherever else. So, yeah, it has the potential to do that.
And they have talked about wishing they could give them to colleagues, like back at their office, that aren't on the course. So, moving it into their communities, which would be better placed with open badges.
Yeah. So, with this reputation getting out there, you obviously do, kind of group learning and stuff like that, but they're also sharing the examples of practice, so they're sharing the ePortfolios amongst themselves.
Yep. And some of them are using their ePortfolios for different purposes, which we haven't spoken about here, but they're using it to curate resources, which is a really a new development that they've had. So they have a shared ePortfolio that anything from the Moodle site, which is our teaching space, they can take up, curate, and put in their curated space, if you like. So some of their ePortfolios are for the long-time journey, their ECV, and some of them for sharing of resources that are curated within a particular domain area, discipline area. So all those that are doing deaf education have a shared, curated ePortfolio resource site. Yeah. So there's a number of different uses of the ePortfolio, but this presentation was just around the badging. Anything else? Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.